Hello everyone and welcome back to the AI English podcast. I'm your host Sarah. Today you are in for a real treat. We have a very special guest with us, Andrew. Andrew is a highly respected expert in the world of business. With a career that spans over 2 decades, he has worked with global companies, mentored young entrepreneurs, and built successful businesses from scratch. His insights are not only valuable, but they are also inspiring for anyone who dreams of mastering the art of business in today's fast-paced world. So grab your coffee, sit back, and get ready to learn English and real-world business knowledge at the same time. Welcome to the show, Andrew. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's truly a pleasure to be here today. Business, to me, is more than just numbers and transactions. It's about people, about ideas, and about solving problems in creative ways. My journey began quite humbly. I remember being a young university student, deeply fascinated by how companies were not just making profits, but shaping societies. After studying business administration and later pursuing my MBA, I had the chance to work internationally, from the bustling financial districts of London to emerging markets in Latin America. Over time, what became clear to me is that successful businesses always have one thing in common. They understand human needs deeply and evolve with them. I'm really excited to share some of those lessons with your audience today, Sarah. And maybe along the way, we'll make business feel a little less intimidating and a lot more exciting for everyone listening.
Andrew, could you take us back to the beginning? What was your very first business experience? And what lesson from that time has stayed with you until today?
That's a great question, Sarah. Well, my very first business experience wasn't in a big corporation or some glamour startup. It actually started when I was just 16 years old. Back then, I noticed that a lot of my neighbors didn't have the time to maintain their gardens. So, one summer, I decided to start a small gardening service. I printed out some flyers, nothing fancy, just black and white sheets I designed on my old computer and delivered them around my neighborhood. At first, I thought it would be easy. Mow a few lawns, trim a few hedges, get paid. But what I quickly realized was that trust was everything. People were letting me into their yards, sometimes even into their homes. I had to show them that I was reliable, honest, and professional, even as a teenager. One of the most powerful lessons I learned during that time was about over-delivering. For example, if I agreed to mow a lawn, I also made sure to clean the sidewalks, pull out some weeds, or trim a few extra bushes, small things they didn't even expect. That attention to detail made clients call me again and again, and soon, my little service grew by word of mouth. Looking back, that experience taught me something essential that applies to every level of business. Success isn't just about doing what you promised. It's about doing a little more. That builds loyalty, reputation, and lasting relationships. And honestly, even today, when I consult for big firms, the same principle applies.
Wow, Andrew, that's such a powerful story. I love how it shows that even small beginnings can teach us the biggest lessons. And I completely agree. Going the extra mile makes all the difference, no matter what industry you're in. Now, since you've worked in so many countries and industries, I'm curious. What would you say are the biggest mistakes that people make when they are just starting a business?
That's a fantastic question, Sarah. And honestly, it's something I think about a lot because I've mentored so many young entrepreneurs over the years. One of the biggest mistakes I see is that people fall in love with the idea of a business, but they don't fall in love with the problem they're solving. Let me explain. A few years ago, I met a young man who wanted to open a coffee shop. Not because he loved coffee, not because he was passionate about hospitality, but because he thought it looked cool on Instagram. He had these dreams of latte art, cozy couches, people working on laptops, the vibe, But when it came time to deal with suppliers, fix broken equipment, wake up at 5 a.m. every day, and manage staff, he absolutely hated it. He didn't love the work behind the dream. That business lasted about 8 months before he closed the doors. Not because he was a bad person or even because he was bad at business, but because he wasn't solving a real problem he cared about. He was chasing an image instead of a mission. Another common mistake is the fear of being small. People think they have to launch with a huge team, a perfect product, an expensive website. But some of the strongest businesses I've ever seen started small, humble, almost invisible. When you start small, you learn. You adapt. You survive. So, if I could give one piece of advice to anyone starting out, it would be, fall in love with solving a real problem. Stay humble. Start messy if you have to. But never lose your heart for the work. At the end of the day, Sarah, business isn't glamorous 99% of the time. It's grit, it's service, and it's persistence.
That's such a brilliant reminder, Andrew. I think many people listening right now needed to hear that. Especially that idea about loving the problem, not just the image. That's powerful. And now that you've touched on the importance of persistence, I'd love to dive a little deeper. Backhand index pointing right, how do you personally stay motivated during the tough times? When business is slow, when obstacles come up, what keeps you moving forward?
That's such an important topic, Sarah. Because let's be honest, the tough times come for everyone. For me, motivation during hard seasons has always come down to two things: vision and discipline. Let me tell you a little story. A few years ago, I started a consulting firm focused on helping small businesses grow sustainably. At first, it was exciting, new clients, new projects. But after about 6 months, there was a massive slowdown. Clients dried up. My inbox was empty. There were days I sat at my desk wondering if I had made a huge mistake leaving a secure job. I remember one afternoon specifically, it was raining outside, gray and cold, and I stared out the window for about an hour just feeling defeated. But here's what I realized in that moment. If I based my action on my feelings, I was going to quit. If I based my action on my vision, on the reason I started, then I had to keep moving, even if I was tired, even if I was scared. So I made a simple rule for myself. Every day, no matter how I felt, I had to take one step forward. It could be writing a blog post, calling a potential client, refining my services, something, anything. Action creates momentum, even when motivation is low. And little by little, it worked. One blog post led to one phone call. One phone call led to one small project. One small project led to a referral. And before I knew it, the business was alive again, stronger, more resilient. Today, when I coach others, I always say, don't wait for motivation. Create tiny victories every day. Your feelings will catch up later. And Sarah, I also believe in celebrating those tiny victories. Even if it's just telling yourself, hey, you showed up today. Because showing up day after day is winning.
That's such a beautiful and real answer, Andrew. I love that. Action creates momentum. I think many people listening will really connect with that idea. Because sometimes it's not about doing everything perfectly. It's about showing up consistently, even on the hard days. And speaking of consistency and growth, I'm curious. Backhand index pointing right, how do you personally set goals for yourself and your businesses? Is there a specific strategy you use to make sure you're not just busy, but truly moving toward your vision?
That's a great question, Sarah. Goal setting is honestly one of the most powerful habits I have ever developed, but I didn't always get it right. When I first started out, I made the classic mistake. I would set huge, overwhelming goals without any real structure. Things like grow my business by 300% this year or launch 3 new products by summer. But because I didn't break those goals down into real, actionable steps, they just stayed dreams. The turning point came when I started using what I call the vision ladder method. Let me tell you how it works. Imagine you have a huge dream, like climbing to the top of a mountain. If you stand at the bottom and look up, it feels impossible. But if you build a ladder, step by step, suddenly that mountain becomes climbable. Every big vision needs small ladders. Each ladder is a mini goal, something achievable in a shorter time frame, like a week or a month. For example, when I wanted to grow my client base, my first mini goal wasn't get 10 new clients. It was reach out to 5 potential clients every week for a month. Notice the difference? One is overwhelming. The other is measurable and manageable. And here's something else. I schedule weekly review sessions with myself. Just 30 minutes every Friday. I sit down, look at my mini goals, and ask 2 questions. What worked? What needs adjusting? It's like recalibrating a GPS. Maybe I didn't hit every target. That's fine. The key is to keep adjusting, keep learning, keep moving. Sarah, the truth is, the ladder of success is built out of very ordinary steps. The extraordinary people are just the ones who keep climbing.
Wow, Andrew, that's honestly gold. I love that image. Building a ladder to your vision instead of trying to jump to the top all at once. And I also love what you said about adjusting and learning instead of feeling like you failed if something doesn't go exactly as planned. So, Andrew, following that idea, backhand index pointing right, how do you personally handle failure or setbacks when they happen? Because I think a lot of our listeners, especially when learning English, might struggle with feeling discouraged when things don't go perfectly.
That's such an important question, Sarah. I'm really glad you asked it because I think failure is one of the biggest myths people misunderstand, especially in business, and honestly, in learning anything new like a language too. Let me tell you a story. Early in my career, I launched a consulting service that I was sure was going to be a huge success. I had the best team. I had done months of preparation. I had invested a lot of my savings into marketing and setup. And you know what happened? It completely flopped. Barely anyone signed up. I remember sitting in my little office, staring at my laptop, feeling like such a failure. I thought, maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. But after a few days of feeling really low, I decided to do something different. Instead of running away from the failure, I studied it. Like a scientist studying an experiment. I asked myself, what did I assume that turned out wrong? Where did I lose connection with my audience? What feedback can I gather? And you know what I realized? My service was good, but I was targeting the wrong audience. The people I was trying to reach didn't actually need what I was offering. It wasn't a failure of quality. It was a failure of fit. From that moment on, I stopped viewing failure as something bad or shameful. I started seeing it as a data point, like getting new information in an experiment. Okay, this method didn't work. Great. Now we know. Let's pivot. In business, and in life, and yes, in learning English, failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the pathway to success. Every time you mess up a word, every time you feel shy speaking English, every time a project falls flat, you're collecting valuable data. If you stick with it, if you choose to learn instead of quit, you're already winning.
Andrew, that is honestly one of the most powerful mindsets I've ever heard explained. Turning failures into data points. Wow, I love that. I think it's so important for all of us, especially language learners, to understand that mistakes are not just okay. They're necessary. Now, I'm curious to dig even deeper. Backhand index pointing right based on your experience. How important is community or support networks when you're trying to grow, whether it's a business or learning a new skill like English?
Absolutely, Sarah. I would say that community is everything when you're trying to grow, whether it's building a business, learning a language, or even changing a habit in your personal life. Let me share another real story. When I first started my second company, after the first one failed, I was determined not to make the same mistakes. One of the biggest changes I made was building a network around me. Not just partners or investors, but people I could actually talk to when things got hard. There was a small group of entrepreneurs in my city who would meet every Thursday night at this little cafe. It wasn't fancy, just coffee, a few notebooks, some laptops. But what happened there was magic. Whenever someone had a bad week, lost a client, had a product fail, we didn't just say, oh, that's too bad. We analyzed it together. We encouraged each other. We celebrated even the smallest wins. Got your first customer? Amazing. Got rejected by 10 clients, but learned something? Let's celebrate that too. And that community was like an emotional shield against giving up. It's the same in language learning. Sarah, if you try to learn English alone, in silence, without feedback, without laughter, without someone reminding you, hey, you're doing great, it's so easy to quit. You feel isolated. You start thinking, maybe I'm just bad at this. But with a community, whether it's a small study group, an online course with other learners, or even a podcast like this, you realize, I'm not alone. You see others struggling too. You see others progressing slowly but surely. And that gives you hope. And hope is one of the strongest fuels for success. In fact, if I could give just one piece of advice to anyone learning English or starting a business, it would be this. Don't try to do it alone. Find your tribe and grow together. Because learning and growing is not a solo journey. It's a team sport.
Andrew, that is such a beautiful way to put it. Learning is a team sport. I really feel that, especially in this podcast where we try to create a little community around learning and encouragement. Now I'm thinking, Backhand index pointing right, you've talked a lot about mindset, perseverance, and community. But what about habits? Could you share some of your daily habits or routines that have helped you keep growing consistently over the years?
Yes, absolutely, Sarah. Habits are like the hidden architecture of success. People often look at big achievements, a successful business, mastering a new language, and they think, wow, that's amazing. But they don't see the tiny, boring, invisible habits behind the scenes every single day. Let me give you a glimpse into my personal routine and a story about how one simple habit literally changed my life. When I was in my 20s, I used to live very chaotically. I would work late nights, skip breakfast, jump from task to task, answering emails at 2 a.m. It was pure adrenaline. And I thought, this is what being an entrepreneur is all about. But over time, it destroyed my focus, my energy, and even my passion. One day, after missing a really important meeting because I overslept, I realized, if I don't change my daily habits, no amount of talent or ambition will save me. So I made a deal with myself. I would create a morning routine, something sacred, unbreakable. It started simple. Wake up at the same time every day, even weekends. 10 minutes of deep breathing or meditation. 20 minutes of reading. Always something inspiring or educational. A simple breakfast, nothing fancy, just healthy fuel. A top 3 list. The 3 most important things to achieve that day. And here's the magic part, Sarah. It wasn't how big the habits were. It was consistency that made the difference. It built momentum. It made me feel in control, calm, and clear-headed, even when business was chaotic. This daily structure gave me the energy to face difficult conversations. It gave me the patience to keep learning. It even made me a better leader because I wasn't always running on empty. And honestly, it's the same with learning English or starting any new project. Tiny habits, done daily, compound over time. They create results you can't even imagine when you start. If you want to learn English faster, for example, don't try to study for 5 hours every Saturday. Instead, spend 15 minutes every single day, listening to a podcast, practicing speaking out loud, writing a short journal entry. Consistency beats intensity every time. And the last thing I'll say is this. Habits are like planting seeds. At first, nothing seems to happen. You water them, you wait, you trust. And then one day, the tree is there, strong, real, and unshakable.
That is so powerful, Andrew. I love that image, planting seeds. And it's so true for everything in life, right? Learning a language, building a career, even becoming the person you want to be. It all starts with tiny daily actions. Now, speaking of learning and growth, I'd love to ask you about common mistakes you see people make when trying to start a business or a big project. Mistakes that maybe they don't even realize they're making at the beginning. Could you share some lessons there?
That's a fantastic question, Sarah. Because honestly, when people first start a business or a big project, they are full of energy, but sometimes they're aiming that energy in the wrong direction. Let me tell you a story about my very first company, because it's a perfect example. When I was about 24, I launched a tech startup with 2 of my best friends. We were passionate. We had an idea we loved. And we thought, this is it. We're going to change the world. We spent months working on the perfect website. We hired designers. We bought expensive software. We stayed up until 3 a.m. tweaking the colors, the logos, the animations. We were doing everything, except talking to real customers. And that, Sarah, is mistake number 1. Falling in love with your product, instead of falling in love with your customer. We were building in a vacuum. We thought we knew what people wanted, but we didn't ask them. We didn't listen. We didn't test early. And when we finally launched, crickets. Almost no one cared. It was heartbreaking. And it taught me a lesson I will never forget. Business is not about your idea. It's about solving someone's real problem. Now, the second big mistake I often see is this. Thinking they have to do everything alone. I used to believe that asking for help was a sign of weakness. I thought, if I'm smart enough and I work hard enough, I can do it all. But the truth is, the most successful people I know are masters of collaboration. They build teams. They ask mentors for advice. They get feedback early and often. And they understand that nobody builds a dream alone. And finally, The third huge mistake: waiting for everything to be perfect before they start. Oh, perfectionism. It's such a beautiful liar. It makes you feel like you're being careful or being professional. But really, it's just fear in disguise. If I could go back in time and tell my younger self one thing, it would be this: launch before you're ready. Learn in public. Get feedback fast. Because action creates clarity. You can't think your way into success. You build your way into success, step by step, messy and imperfect, but moving forward. And honestly, Sarah, I believe it's the same with learning English. People wait until their grammar is perfect, until their accent is perfect, until they feel ready. But if you wait for perfect, you will wait forever. Start now. Speak now. Make mistakes proudly, because mistakes are just proof that you're trying. Progress, not perfection. That's the real secret.
Wow, Andrew. That was incredible, and so true not just for business but for anything we want to achieve in life. Falling in love with your customer, asking for help, taking imperfect action. Those are universal lessons. And I love how you connected it back to learning English, because it's so easy for students to fall into that waiting for perfect trap too. Now, speaking of collaboration and asking for help, in the next part, I'd love for us to dive into the power of mentorship. How finding the right mentor or being a mentor yourself can completely transform your journey. Thank you so much, Andrew. Your words are a true inspiration. And to everyone listening, thank you for sharing this time with us today. We hope you leave with new ideas, new motivation, and a smile. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a comment with your thoughts, and share this episode with someone who needs a little extra encouragement. This was podcast number 7 of the AI English podcast. I'm your host, Sarah. And always remember, big dreams start with small steps. Let's keep learning and growing together. See you next time.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been truly wonderful being part of this podcast. I hope that everyone listening feels a little more confident today about their dreams, their ideas, and their ability to grow. Remember, every great achievement started with someone who decided to try. Stay curious, stay courageous, and keep moving forward. I'm wishing you all the best on your journeys, both in English and in life.